So how are Lab for Hire and group partners working together to help CEOs and companies instigate change?
Well, this is part of the leverage business model that I talk about with Lab for Hire, in that we bring in the right people to solve the right problems. And it's a company like Group Partners and John who understands, and well, you can explain it, how you get to that point where they're not solving the wrong problem really well.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. The point is, most of the organisations have a question in their head which is probably not the right question. So the very first thing is to help them get to the right question even to ask. And so we do that very visually, and we get their senior executives and work with them to understand the situation that they're in right now, and do that visually so they can actually see the whole infrastructure and architecture of their business literally on a wall. So that's very quick, it's very engaging, and it's very respectful of all the people in the room, whereas a consultant typically goes in and tells them what the answer is, and often it isn't. So it works really well, and it's rapid, it's designed for this century, and it works very well then to bring in Lab for Hire & Co, because they have an unlimited array of resources that they can bring to bear on the problem. Exactly, the black book.
So it's working with the right people at the right time to solve the right problem. But definitely Group Partners come in initially as our phase 0 to just get that riff started.
So this is something that's grown over time, because what I can see is it's an ability for you guys to ask the right questions, but also then to know what to do with the answers. That's not something that's like learned overnight, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly right. And it's interesting that it's unique every time, because every client has got its own situation. So there's no cookie cutter model, there's no one size fits all. And that's why you need a leverage model, because the resources are different each time.
So how does the wall work?
Wow, the wall. How does the wall work? It's a magic wall. So
there's no hiding place, that's for sure.
Yeah, it takes no prisoners. It's a logical model. It says, here is the result that we would love. Everyone gets the opportunity to define it. I mean, we were working with an organisation around innovation where we asked the room what their definition of innovation was, and for all the number of people in the room, we had a very different answer each time.
Yeah.
And then they realised that innovation wasn't what they wanted at all.
But they just kept saying the words, and I could have gone off and done innovation, but it wasn't the answer really to the question that needed to be solved. And by John keep poking and asking why and why and why and drilling it down, so all of the answers are all on the wall. They're not in a 200-page PowerPoint that people can just nod. It's there in front of you. There's no hiding place, and everyone is accountable for everything that they've said. And then there comes the time where, okay, well then if we do this, then who does that? And it's all really well planned out, and that then makes implementation much, much easier. It's not just words.
I remember thinking a long, long time ago that I was sitting in a meeting room with people, and the conversation just caused everybody to nod because everybody understood the words that were being used. But as everyone went away from that meeting, they all went off and did something completely different.
Oh, wow.
Nobody checked in that they had the same definition. So if you imagine that in the context of transformation and change these days, just imagine the cost, the risk, the life and death situation.
Yeah, that was like the word, when we did that first workshop on the word innovation, it meant 4 different things to 4 different people. You know, they thought they were going to be working much more with startups. Someone else felt they were going to be doing product development, but it was all the same word. And so it was really good to have John really
kicking the tyres.
Yeah, kicking the tyres.
So the dynamic between how Lab for Hire works and the knowledge that comes with that, and also between Group Partners and the experience that comes with that, it's a real clear sense of you're kind of like translators in a way that open up pipelines and channels for communication within companies.
Yeah.
But applying that at, for example, CEO or corporate level, does that then, or how does that then allow the people, the decision makers, the kind of the ability to filter this down, or do you help with that as well?
Right, so because it's visual, and owned by the people in the room, they already have a tool that they own. And ownership means understanding and engagement with the problem at a much more deep level, not the superficial level of reading a document. As Nicole said, that's just not good enough anymore. But what that also means is they've got tools they can take out into the enterprise, so they can literally immediately go and have a conversation with their peers or their group or their team or their division. And so by working that way, you're already building a blueprint, an architecture, a framework within which everyone can operate, which is very different and very relevant to the problems of today.
And the beautiful thing with Lab for Hire in this leverage model is that, of course, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We had a really nice example working with a big FMCG where before we even started with the job, with their supply chain leaders globally, they'd asked me to set up an Inspire Day. This was very different from the work that I do with John, but Lab for Hire set up this Inspire and Educate Day as to how it was going to work really well with their following day of all the business that was going to be taking place for their next year in planning. And I'd said to them, before I start looking for blockchain or Internet of Things companies, all these different companies, I want you to go check out if you have those people within. And he said, no, we don't. I said, I'm not doing a scrap of work until you go and investigate your own company and break down your own silos. He came back within a couple of days and he said they'd found a head of innovation who was working in Paris, and he said he'd also spoken to the worldwide IT people, and they were already working with Accenture and blockchain companies. I went, great. He said, so you're already worth your weight in gold just by getting me to get off of my backside to see who else. Because otherwise I would have reinvented the wheel and started speaking to lots of other companies and started from scratch when the people within that global organisation were already doing it. He just didn't know about it.
So it's huge value in knowing which questions to ask,
Yeah.
and knowing what to do with the answers. And almost like holding the hand as well through that process. Because sometimes as well for a CEO it's a lot of responsibility to instigate such dynamic change.
I think the other big advantage of working that way, and particularly the relationship we have with these approaches and these tools, is the impartiality of it. So we're not looking to bring a solution to a problem.
Yeah.
It's let's figure out what the problem is and then bring the solutions to that, which is incredibly empowering for the senior executives who are just literally fed up at being abused by organisations with solutions looking for problems. And although that's a cliche, it's still true.
And you can see why they do it, because they need to pay all these salaries and pay for large buildings. The Lab for Hire leverage model means we don't have any of that because we're pulling in the right people for the right job, and we're not paying their salaries, or we're not paying for a huge building. It's a very different way of working.
The transparency is liberating.
Yeah.
Fabulous. What a great dynamic team.
Thank you.
Thank you.